Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Imran Nanawala, and I'm the manager of programs and development at A Continuous Charity. We have a very exciting program for you today: social, economic, and educational justice. I'd like to thank our partners, ICNA Chicago, and we have an amazing panel with us here today. We got Ustadth Ubaydullah Evans, scholar from the Alam program and residential scholar of the Alam program. Habeeb Quadri, Superintendent of MCCA and National Distinguished Principal Award recipient, Sheikh Abdullah Oduro of Yaqeen Institute, and Dr. Muhammad Khalifa, Professor and Beck Chair of Ideas in Education at the University of Minnesota. Brothers, how are you guys all doing?
Alhamdulillah. Okay, mashallah, my mic has been unmuted. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Muhammad. What's going on, Akhi?
You got it. You got the best hand, man.
If I had your hands, I would cut mine off. Sheikh Abdullah.
Yes, sir.
How are you, Habeeb?
Alhamdulillah. I'm trying to get like you, man.
My brother?
Alhamdulillah, I've been good.
You don't want to get like me. How is New You? How is New You?
Alhamdulillah, it's coming along, man. It's coming along. You know, we just trying to just keep moving momentum, you know, working with New You and working with Yaqeen, trying to do some products with them and just doing what we can to get the message out, you know, to help people.
MashaAllah. May Allah bless you, man, and give success to your efforts, inshallah. And Habeeb, how are you, my beloved?
Alhamdulillah, bi khair. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. I heard some stories recently about you and your basketball coach. It sounds like he had a profound impact on you, but he didn't teach you how to hoop, though. So,
You still haven't come to the courts.
Listen, save the fire, guys. Save the fire for the discussion. We don't need to bring the fire this early, brothers.
That's how the Chicago guys act, Muhammad, man. We ain't going to Chicago.
It's been 25 years. I've asked him to play with us, but he's too scared, right? But his game is
He left the screen. Mashallah. he took the headphones out too.
We have a reunion every year, so you could come up to on Harrison.
Bismillah. I'm waiting for my invite.
I'll tell
you just got the invite, fam.
Bismillah.
Ustadth Ubaydullah, he heard it, but he's not listening. He heard the invite. So, brothers, I want to say that I'm very pleased and honored to have you guys on today, and I was trying to come up with a structure for this conversation, and I thought maybe the best way is not for it to be super structured based on the plethora of talent that we have today. And, you know, mashallah, we have resident scholars, brothers who were trained classically, Islamically. We got a specialist in education in Muhammad Khalifa, Habeeb Quadri, and even Sheikh Ubaydullah Evans. We got a community leader in brother Abdullah Oduro. So obviously, we all know what's going on in the country in the last few weeks with the murder of George Floyd. And, you know, people have used this in many different ways in terms of the narrative, putting it on the news, using it for promotion of their organizations in many which ways. But the first question that I had was for you, Ustadth Ubaydullah, was, you know, we're seeing a lot of human emotion come out. We're seeing a lot of passion and emotion and different types of reactions. My question is, it's said that, you know, when we act in such ways, sometimes we don't make the best decisions, and our objectivity can be called into question. So what do you say about the type of reactions we've been seeing on multiple different fronts, on the different sides? And is this a normal human response?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulih al-kareem wa ba'd. You know, mashallah, man, that's a very good question. And I think I want to approach the question from a few different angles. You know, first of all, any equivalency that is made between the life of George Floyd and the destruction of property is a false equivalency, you know. And I don't think anyone talking about property is equating police brutality or systemic inequality or anti-Black racism or white supremacy, all of which need to be fought and eradicated at once, with destruction of property. That's the first thing that I want to say about that. The second thing that I want to say about that is this is one of the places that we are blessed with the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, I think sometimes as Muslims, we don't appreciate how comprehensive the example of the Prophet is, alayhi wasallam. And I hope I don't upset anyone's sensibilities, but I'll have you know that the Prophet himself, alayhi wasallam, ordered preemptive caravan raids. This is something that is a part of the sunnah of the Prophet, alayhi wasallam. Preemptive caravan raids. However, preemptive caravan raids were not ordered as expressions of anger or expressions of rage. It was to call attention to the fact that I am in possession of a superior moral vision for society. So that redistribution of wealth that took place in those caravan raids, it called attention to the fact that I have an independent alternative moral vision for society. And that was a part of it. On the other hand, if someone is taking, if someone is looting, if someone is damaging property, and it's not an expression of an alternative moral vision, but rather an expression of anger, an expression of rage, an expression of divestiture, disinvestment, an expression of perhaps a lack of fealty to the prevailing order, I personally am going to suspend judgment. I think it's wisest for me to suspend judgment, recognizing that I perhaps have more invested and more to lose than many of my brothers and sisters that have engaged in such action. What I will say, and what I think my role is as a Muslim, is to say that our engagement with these issues cannot limit itself to anger, cannot limit itself to frustration, cannot limit itself to rage. Using a very simple analogy, if I were building a property and I noticed that the existing property was infested with termites, and we said, okay, we're going to have to knock this structure down and build one on top of it. Whoever does that demolition, it's not necessary that they have any expertise. It's not necessary that they have special skills. I probably can, demo requires some special skills, but if I have strong people with sledgehammers, maybe in the space of a day, they could knock that structure down. However, when we rebuild on top of that structure, I need craftsmen, I need carpenters, I need electricians, I need stonemasons, I need bricklayers. And I think that as Muslims, rather than judging, being quick to judgment, we should be quick to justice, but we should recognize that I think our task is the construction of new ways of human encounter, the construction of healthy societies and healthier models of being human and being in community with one another. The frustration and the anger is just that, it's frustration and anger. And I'm just reminded that I'm reminding people it must be connected to an alternative moral vision, or it will also consume not only the assets and resources of those that have oppressed, it will consume even those that are expressing that rage and frustration. And Allah knows best.
Sheikh Abdullah, can I ask you to respond to some of what Ustadth Ubaydullah said, and in general also expound on, as a scholarly person, someone who studied the deen, how are we supposed to react? Add on to that, how are we supposed to react? And again, there's not just one or two reactions, right? There's a spectrum of different reactions and how people are engaging with what's going on. So what would you add to that, Sheikh Abdullah?
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala amma ba'd. As it was eloquently stated by our Sheikh Ubaydullah, I think that's what's important. Firstly, how are we supposed to react? I think the wording of that question even can pose some idealistic type of thinking and trying to program people to think idealistically when you're dealing with human beings. Now, we can talk about the fact that, okay, this is what may have been preferred in this cookie cutter scenario. But as we understand now, it's much deeper than that, because really the issue, why people are crying, why people are mad, as you see many posts, I mean, that that may make one sad, make one just ponder over the situation and what it all boils down to. And that's the crux of the issue. That it comes back to a much bigger problem. It comes back to a much bigger problem that's affected a genus of people. And when you see that rage, as I always tell people, they didn't just wake up like that. They didn't just wake up angry. They didn't just wake up, screaming even at each other. People, giving each other advice to stop what they're doing. Some say, no, I'm tired of this. I was just at a community event with some of the leaders in our community. And the pastor of the church, he was saying, people in our community are just angry, and they're just angry at what's going on because enough is enough. And how many times has that been said? I don't know if any of you seen the video where it's, I put it on my Facebook page, where there was a man. If you were to not hear what they were saying, he's grabbing the man and he's in front of him and he's trying to tell him. And when you play the volume, you turn the volume up. He's basically saying, "I know, I understand. But is this the way?" And the man was 41. The other individual, what was he, 36? And then he pulls to his left side a 16-year-old man. And when you see the 16-year-old's face, it just reminded me of my son. It's like you see the rage in his face. And he's like, look, you 16, I'm 35, he's 41. And we're saying the same thing with the same problem, showing how this generation, the same issue is going on. And that's what people are tired of. So when somebody has faced that and they've seen it, the generational racism, the generational stereotypes, and then you just tell them it's supposed to be like this, you see? And that's why it's so important for us to understand the context when we want to apply text. You have to understand the context of the situation to give the medicine appropriately. You have to, as I always say, you have to connect before you correct. You have to understand the premise of what's going on before you even say something is supposed to happen. As I'm sitting in the cushion in my chair right now, there are people that are sitting on the street right now. They're supposed to do certain things, but when looking at the reality of their situation, that has to be taken into the consideration before we say something is supposed to happen or something is not supposed to happen, and realizing that this is the result and the effect of not just what happened with George Floyd, but the premise behind that. And one has to have education and understand how that is properly applied and see how that affects people. And then one will be able to, maybe even advise depending on their situation at hand. So I don't think it's a cookie cutter answer as of yet, when seeing this particular situation and what's going on.
I appreciate that, Sheikh. Brother Habeeb, you wrote a very nice article a couple of days ago that you shared on Facebook and over a newsletter. And in response to your article, well, number one, you mentioned something that I want you to expound on, and I'm going to also ask Brother Dr. Muhammad this question. But you mentioned many people are quick to use the hashtag Black Lives Matter, but they still foster subtle racism, stereotypes, and prejudice within their own families and circles of friends. This is not okay. So I'm going to ask you to expound on that. But one thing that I want you to start with is that on Facebook, when you posted this article, somebody asked you a question. They said, well, what are we supposed to do? We live in the suburbs. Are we supposed to do monthly seminars or workshops? And they said, this is a token response. And you responded by saying, we need to stop thinking of solutions and start listening. So I want you to expound on that. What did you mean by that? That we need to start listening and stop always thinking about solutions. And then after that, please give us a quick insight into who Coach Carter and Mr. Earl were, because you mentioned them in your writing, and I think it's very profound.
The point, I'm going to speak on from just the immigrant perspective here. And one of the things is that in our immigrant community, we have, when the brother was like, okay, well, what should we do? I'm like, we need to start listening to the African-American or Black community and see what do they want us to do? How do they want us to help? Because we've been on the sideline for too long. We've kind of let things go. We've used for all their struggles, and we benefited quite a bit. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to kind of get across. And that's why I'm listing on points, because there are many, just in my own personal life, going to Chicago public schools, there are many individuals from the Black community that's helped me to move forward, right? And then that's that's how I kind of connected with stating how some individuals played a big part, right? Sometimes we have historical figures, but then a lot of times we need to open up and say, look, there are people right in front of us. And if we just looked at them, they have helped us move to where we are. And so one of the big things was that listening. I think we don't, especially in our community, is that we need to listen and tell us, hey, and let them tell, let the Black community tell us, hey, how do you want us to help? What should we do and do the proper way? A lot of times we're like, okay, we're going to do a rally and then let's get some individuals together. I'm like, well, why don't we just participate in the rallies that they have? Right? Why not go into the seminars that they already have set up, our programs that they have, and now always trying to think of a solution, but now just be part of the solution and as the community, the Black community leads. So that was that reason there. The second part of like individuals, like Mr. Earl and stuff. I went to Chicago public schools, so the school I went to, they had a busing. So they had, that was the first time they bused an Afro-American students, and then they also had another bus with Southeast Asians. So they had two buses, and in snowballs they used to call it in the Hindu bus. Then they used to have another derogatory name for the other bus. But I used to kind of live close by, so a lot of times I got the brunt of walking back to school. But one of the things is that one of the teachers, Mr. Earl, played a big significant part. He came outside, hung out with us just to make sure, because there was a few minorities in the school at that time. This is like I'm talking about 70s and mid 80s. And so I think that planet played a big part in his individual as a social studies teacher, interacting with us. And I always say the greatest form of learning is through interaction. So it wasn't just the classroom setting, but it was outside the classroom, even to a point that I kind of joke, hey, I became a social studies teacher because he really made an impact on my life. And he used to be a very well-dressed. I'm talking about Ubaydullah Evans kind of dressed, mashallah kind of, right? So, and that played a big part, And so, a lot of guys, people always like, are you always wearing suits? Are you always wearing that? I was like, it came from, I was like, look, I always remembered him because even as a social studies teacher, he was ready. Like, he looked professional even to teach middle school. And I think that played a big part. Then Coach Carter, basketball played a big emphasis in my life, right? It really gave me confidence, so on and so forth, being the captain. But that Coach Carter giving me the opportunity to, to play with maybe the oldest AAU team in the city of Chicago, the Chicago Demons. And in the practice used to be at Crabini Green. And so my father was not kind of have it. So my father, he came and talked to my dad, gave him like, hey, you know what? I will make sure. So they would get me on the bus, get me back on the train so I could go back on the north side. So that relationship and traveling, 6-7 different states in 2 years, and then, a lot. So there was just a lot of experience. So that became that big interaction. So don't want to take too much time, but how those parts of my life has helped. And I felt like, hey, now it's our, we've been benefited in many ways because of the Black community, from job opportunities to academics. As I said, this whole school was officially one of the schools that they were trying to build in and to stop segregation in busing in students. So it kind of gives you an idea of how it has impacted. And I think our community, the immigrant community, needs to really step up now and be part of this movement.
I appreciate that. And then Dr. Khalifa, I'm going to ask you to kind of expound on what all the brothers said, but I have a specific question for you with your specialty being in culturally responsive school leadership and community engagement. And you also have a very profound and nice quote on your university homepage or on your particular staff page, which says, leaders who do not act dialogically, but insist on imposing their decisions, do not organize the people, they manipulate them. They do not liberate, nor are they liberated. They oppress. I just want you to unpack that quote in terms of community successes, community failures, how we should be working with our school leaders, how we should be working with our nonprofit and organizational and faith-based leaders. Where have their successes been? Where can we improve? And then we can have some follow-up after that.
Now you're gonna lay all of that on me, man.
We saved the best for last, brother.
You're the doctor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Well, I don't. First of all, thank you for quoting that. That actually from Paulo Freire, who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That was the quote from him. It's a very popular book with educators. And I urge all of you to read it. Anybody listening. He was one of the few individuals that both was a scholar and at the same time went back and became like literally the Minister of Education in Brazil and served as the state minister for a while. So Pedagogy of the Press is a book that must be read. But I mean, I agree with all of the brothers. I you know, starting with Ubaydullah, I believe that we have to have a vision. We have to have, that's the only thing that we have. That's one thing that I think we have that many people don't have, right? At the same time, you know, we're at a moment, like literally, I don't think that you know, a lot of the Muslims realize at what moment we're at in America because we're here. But I'm getting texts like every other day from folks from 30 some odd countries, you know, from government all the way down to just personal friends, that the entire spectacle of the world right now is not only about race, but it's about Black men at this moment. And so I don't think I do think we need vision, but okay, so from a Black male perspective, when my life is threatened, right? So first of all, I lost my employment in COVID, and many of us was hurting before COVID. And then you have to realize how many times many of us have seen this. Like my first student that was killed, when I was a student teacher, my supervising teacher was a man named Khalifa, and it was at Central High in Detroit. 10th grader shot in the back as he was running from Detroit police. He tried to hop the fence. And he wasn't the first and he wasn't the last. There were many before and after that. So when you come to me and say, look, there needs to be a vision behind the protest. Yes, there does need to be a vision. But I'm not seeing a path forward right now. You understand what I'm saying? So I need to live. I need to know that somebody who looks like me can't get choked out. And then yet again, nothing will ever happen because of that. Because if you want to talk to me about vision and I'm in that kind of situation, I'm not having that conversation with you about vision right now. You know, now I'm in Minnesota and I've been out on the streets just about every day. A lot of the people who are busting the windows out and starting the fires are not people of color, and they're not from Minnesota. I've seen it. There are videos circulating. I've seen it with my own self. There are people with gas. So I'm not necessarily talking about what's happening here, but I am saying that the rage that people are feeling is not only rage, it's despondency. And so you can't rationalize with a person who doesn't have hope. So I think that the vision that Ubaydullah was talking about can give us hope. Now, coming to the communities and to the quote that my brother Habeeb was talking about, it's funny. I was out in the street again today, and today was the Muslim rally. I don't want to step on any toes or anything like that. But today was the Muslim time to go out to the square. So just picture Cub Food, the Arab-owned store out in South Minneapolis. It's an intersection, right? And maybe about a 4-block radius, but at the intersection. So going both ways is completely shut down, and it's almost like a kumbaya type feel. It was today. There are memorials and there are pictures and there are murals and there are people singing and saying we're all standing this together. And the first day I went out, I went out the first time that people congregated. It was 70-some% white people, and many of the white people that look like the woman in Central Park who called the police because of her dog, talking about Black Lives Matter. Now, I don't want to hear that from you. And so today, when I went out, I'm not going to jump on white folk today, but I'm going to jump on my African Muslims from Minneapolis, because you want to, maybe every other person quoted Malcolm X. I did not know Malcolm X. I'm too young. But I can almost guarantee you that Malcolm X would not have been comfortable in any of those African Muslim masjids here. He wouldn't have been comfortable in hardly any immigrant masjids here. Many people from the immigrant community love to cite Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali stepped away from the immigrant spaces with good purpose. I was born Muslim. I went to the first Muslim school in the state of Michigan, Sister Claire Muhammad School. I was born, I attended the Canton Mosque and Arbor Mosque, like all of these immigrant spaces. I went to Camp El Hilal, the first Muslim camp in the nation, and I went on to live in several Muslim countries. I'm still not comfortable in hardly any Muslim masajid, and I'm not even going to begin to tell you how many of our Muslim kids have left the faith because, in their words, because they went to a Muslim school. In their words. Okay, so when you have that kind of trauma, when you have that kind of denial, and when you have the kind of hurt that happens, we do need the hope and we need a way forward, but we can't do that with hypocrisy. Like, this is where the buck stops right now. Anybody who tolerates any type of anti-Blackness like with all of this, like we have a major uproar in Minneapolis right now because many of the Muslim leaders and Muslim business owners are being called out. Just specifically, their families are coming out with the N-word. It's been happening, just like the killings have been happening, as I just described to you. The only difference now is cell phones. Well, the only difference now with these racist Arabs and Desis and Africans and others that have been here, the only difference now is George Floyd. What's different? So I don't want to take all the time, but those are just my initial thoughts to your question. Did I answer your main question? No, I feel like I missed that. So.
No, you did. I mean, this is an ongoing conversation. But one thing that I wanna ask, and I haven't written this question down, but something that's kind of been irking me recently, and you guys can expound on it, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But you brought up examples of racism within our community and certain types of racism and prejudice. But for me, some of the way that our community and communities in general have been responding is also, in a sense, racist, right? Or a form of just, it's like that. What in the comment to Habeeb's writing, where the guy said this is like a token response, and I'm not talking about Habeeb's response, but just okay, let's look for the one black person to bring onto the panel. Let's let the one black person give the Jummah khutbah today, or give a 5-minute khatira, and like this is gonna erase hundreds of years of not understanding one another, and sometimes the hatred and the bigotry that's even been fostered in our communities and the backgrounds from where we come. So how do we respond to even this experience of, okay, let's find a black person to give a platform to? So on one hand, I see that. You go ahead.
No, I wanted to say one other thing that your question is bringing back to me, and that is this notion of, first of all, what white folks do in this country is that they mess things up royally. Not all white folks, but you understand. I'm using that as a generic marker right now. Is that they come up, they instigate problems, they create problems, they develop, and then they pull in a black person in order to ancient mama them out of the situation. Okay, and unfortunately, Muslims have a bad habit of exoticizing black folks in similar ways. And what that means is that first of all, you're going to lay all of the onus on them to solve the problem that you brought. Now, what kind of sense does that make? And so this constant exoticization. So this has to be a little bit more nuanced of a discussion of simply using. So what does our faith require? Does it require us not to be racist, or does it require us to be anti-racist? Okay. Does it require us to be equal with each other or equitable with each other? So there's some nuance in the terms that our faith, I believe, speaks to, but that not many people and many scholars have written about. So I just spoke, but I just wanted to add a little bit of nuance, I think, Imran, to your question.
Oh, hold on. I got to interject. Hold on. I'm sorry. We got to unpack that, right? Don't just say that and run away, man. We got to unpack that, right? They got to unpack that shake. The two similarities or two contrasts that you gave.
Okay, so
you can take my time. My time is booked. Come on, go ahead. Between the brothers, go ahead. I want to sit here.
So let me bring it back to education. Imran had originally asked me that. So basically, you get educators showing up and saying, "Hey, I know that my black boys are being suspended 7 or 8 times more likely than their classmates are not black boys." But I didn't do that. Look, I just showed up in the school yesterday, right? So this is not my problem. Besides, look out in society. That's how society is. They're going to prison at the same rate. They're being killed by police at the same rate. They are, yada, 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 and the list goes on, right? And so as educators, what we push is that it's not enough to assume a position of neutrality. It's not enough to step in and say, look, I'm not racist. You have to actively pursue not being racist, and you have to actually. So that's personally, that's discursively, that is, interpersonally. But then, what about the systemic structures? What if you show up in an organization and you say, "Look, I love black people. Alhamdulillah, my wife is black," which is rare. My wife is black. Now, does that mean that you get a pass? Or let me give you one more. Let's say I'm black, and you show up in an organization, and black boys, right, are being oppressed in a similar type of way. What does that make you? Can you get a pass because you're black? So it's not enough to show up with an assumption of neutrality. You have to actually show up and say, look, if there's oppression here, my religion commands me to uproot and to extinguish oppression at the best of my ability. It's not, hey, I didn't start this oppression. It's ridiculous when people do. And I think that folks probably are familiar with the equity equality conversation, which is with equality, you give everybody the exact same thing. What if I needed a little bit more? What if you already got something for 100 or 200 years and now you're going to show up and give us the same thing here on out? No. This thing has already been lopsided, right? So now you have to do whatever it takes in order to make me whole, in order to make me human. So that is equity. And I would argue and suggest, and I think all of you are more knowledgeable than me about Islam, but I would argue that our religion calls not for equality, but for equity, and not for being not racist, but anti-racist.
No. And that's the subhanAllah in Arabic, they have that. That's adl, and that's justice. Doesn't mean equality. It means, you know, you give everything what its due purpose and portion is based on their makeup or whatever situation may call for. And that's beautiful. Yes.
I was going to say, Ustadth Ubaydullah, I want you to chime in.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, I think what Dr. Muhammad is saying is very beautiful. And I think he's also giving himself short shrift in terms of his knowledge of Islam. You know, no, he absolutely is.
Of course he is.
Yeah, of course he is, right? But the only thing that concerns me when I think about that dichotomy is I never want people that are oppressed to see that ultimately the agency lies beyond themselves. That ultimately I'm waiting for you to make a gesture of equity. I'm waiting for you to repudiate racism. And I worry about that. So I'm there with you. And I think that when we talk about, you know, the Prophet ﷺ said, Unsur akhak zaliman aw madluman. Help your brother, whether he is doing wrong or being wrong. And I think that this khitab, this speech that Dr. Muhammad was beautifully expressing, this is what we say to those in positions of advantage, those that have within their means the ability to repudiate racism, the ability to do things to bring about equity. However, when it comes to speaking to those that have been oppressed, I personally find much more victory and much more vindication in talking to them about things that they individually can do. Don't wait. Don't feel that it is someone else's repentance that will lead to your vindication, or that that you will not be vindicated until they repudiate racism, or you will not see justice until they decide upon a new track of engagement. No, there are things that you can do individually, expecting the providence of God, that will give you vindication and give you victory and give you justice. If they so choose to repudiate racism, they will be redeeming their own souls. And if they don't, then they will be damning their own souls. You know, and I think we have to have the ability to speak on both tracks.
Can you, so let's discuss this in terms of not looking for external validation, right? And what does that look like on the ground in terms of, now we're talking about Black communities, so we're not looking to be accepted, approved by external communities, or maybe upliftment, or for their version of what upliftment looks like for Black communities. How is that measured? What are some steps that can be taken to do that if it's needed?
Bismillah. I'm going to speak to this, and I'm going to get out the way and just listen to this amazing panel that you've assembled. But I personally have no interest in tokenism. I don't even, I mean, to be honest with you, even this idea of, like, some people have been reaching out to me and, you know, apologizing. And I appreciate that as, you know, a gesture of fraternity or sorority. However, I'm really thinking about how we can change systemic inequity structures. I'm not really so interested about that interpersonal space. Like, you know, I don't, alhamdulillah, I'm not interested in marrying anybody's daughter, or, you know what I'm saying? I'm not interested in, you know, if you call me Kellu, or, you know, those are things that, you know, those things occur. I'm thinking, if we are to be in community with each other, how can we arrange community and life in ways that appear more equitable? And I think that if we're going to talk about that, we have to start with resources. Somehow in America, the conversation about justice always eludes economic justice. We're talking about money. We're talking about resources. We're talking about generational wealth. And I think sometimes the conversation becomes so tokenistic. You know, we put, like you said, this person gave a khutbah. We took a photograph together. I visited this person's home. They visited my home. I think those are good as gestures of fraternity, sorority. I think, yes, we can't be in these kind of exclusionary silos that prevent us from recognizing each other's humanity, etc. Sure. But if we're really to tackle the issue of inequity in our community, at some point we have to talk about living together. And that does not mean being next door neighbors, but sharing our resources together, both material and immaterial, and educating our children together and what that really looks like. Other than that, I really think that we're talking, you know, about things that I think are well-intended, but somewhat superficial, in my estimation.
But Ubaydullah, let me see if I can add a little bit of nuance and convince you on a point that you made. And so scholars in this area kind of talk about materiality, as you alluded to, structures in place. I mean, we can quantify exactly, if we want to, what people in this country have benefited off of the oppression of others. But the point I want to make is that you have material stuff, and then you have this discursive and non-material area, and the two are intricately linked, man. Number one, first of all, on the immaterial side, so for example, Detroit, you know that, as you know, I'm from Detroit. There were a number of laws. You had the National Freeway Clearance Act. You had the Slum Clearance Act. You had eminent domain. You had all of these laws that between the 40s and the 60s were passed and could have been leveled at any community, right? So now we're talking about structural reform, but it was only leveled at Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, two areas in Detroit that were the Black economic centers because of, okay, now this is the point I'm trying to make, the non-material. So because these people, governors, are up all the way to the president. I mean, there was a national freeway and the National Slum Clearance Act. Because of the immaterial, they applied the material in ways that align with their white racial epistemologies. And number one. Number two, as it comes to the Muslim community, we can bring it home. I'm not interested in praying next to somebody who doesn't see me as human, man. I'm not interested in building community. In fact, if you take some of my akhuwa from me, I'm going to wait. It might be today, might be tomorrow. I'm taking something from you. Call me petty. Call me whatever you want. But that's sort of how we roll. You're not going to take this from me. That, in my opinion, you're assessing my humanity and measuring it. And then think that I'm going to give you 100% akhuwa as it pertains to the structure. So I'm just... I know some scholars, like, for example, this was one very popular article that I suggest you to read. Decolonization is not a metaphor. So you got people who are saying, look, it's material. Then you have people who look specifically at, for example, a good colleague of mine here, Professor Lindsay, Minnesota, looks at how people construct their identities based on the subhumanity of Black people. They need that. In order to construct themselves as whole, they need somebody else to be subhuman in order for them to even recognize themselves as whole. And so both are important and are intricately linked because policies are never written with code anymore. So, you know, they're never written with explicit language anymore. They're written in code. I go into a school, Habeeb can tell you, you say, okay, we got a sagging pants policy. Now, do you see Black boys in that policy anywhere? No. So we're dealing with structures. But who is it really directed at? Sure. You understand?
No, absolutely. I stand corrected in terms of dismantling the discursive aspect of white supremacy and anti-Black racism. It's an absolute. I think what I was talking about was interpersonal. That I'm less interested in kind of the interpersonal space in which we engage. And I'm more interested in the structural space in which we engage. Although, to your point, they are like they're intertwined, right? They're inextricably linked. So that if you don't think of me as human, the policies you develop will actually reflect that inability to see me as human.
to go in a different direction. And obviously we can come back to this, but Brother Habeeb, I was thinking as the brothers were talking about the communities and some of the issues that we even face in our own community. You gave some good examples about the 2 different buses when you were in CPA, Chicago Public School, CPS. So from your time in being in elementary school and secondary school to where you're at now, where you deal with so many different kids in so many different communities, have you seen that the new generation or the younger generation of Muslims is handling this situation and this complex identity better than the older generation, or more effectively than the older generation?
Would you say? I would say there, through interaction with different minority, different groups, you get a better relationship, right? Our elders came, they were just trying to figure out themselves how to integrate into society. But at the same time, there is still a problem. And I'm going to say something. I think we have people in our community who might love the Black culture, right? But I don't know if there's, you can have the, oh man, I like the Black culture. You might like this, but do you like the person, right? This individual. Are you hanging? I know I might kind of push it there, but there's this thing, or some people like, oh yeah, I'm like, really? When people bring up, I'm like, well, when have you on your own, not because of that event, just like I'm just going to visit predominantly African-American masjid, or do I ever have friends who you talk to, bring over, blah blah, so many different factors, right? And that's one kind of caveat. But the other thing is really, as Sheikh Abdullah brought up on this, the idea of even providing the right resources. And a lot of times in our community is when we do want to do something, we're like, hey, we have this plan, let's call someone. But do we really say, hey, let's kind of like integrate together and say, hey, let's plan this together, or let's go ahead and see this? And that's why, like, even this whole thing of right now, the protest, someone's like, well, we should do one. I'm like, why don't we just look at what's like, right? I'm like, hey, there's several ones that the communities are already doing, and we should just participate with them, than trying to always have our separate one and bring in, like a few Black leaders, and just like, okay, now we're part of you. So I think that there is that thing, and I know I'm kind of maybe opening up another whole can, but I think there is. It's hard for me to say this because I'd rather have them be honest, because I could say we might be doing a part, but we might not be doing what we really need to be doing, right? And that's why it's very uncomfortable. But I think when people say, "Oh yeah, no, we're there," I'm like, no. I think there's this thing of love of Black culture, and again, I hope I'm not coming off the wrong way, but I think that's where there is a problem in our community. Like and that's why purposely when I wrote it, it was to our own self, and I include myself in this, right? And I think so. It's not going to be easy for me to answer that, but I would really, maybe individuals, and then Brother Muhammad Khalifa, who I haven't seen for a long time. I was in Detroit Public Schools too, and so I think that's where we met. When my cousin-in-law is a good friend, and that's how we first met. But so there's inequalities. Like, I've been in the inner city, and I've seen there's a book called Savage Inequalities back in the days with Jonathan Kozel. But if you see what the Detroit Public Schools and what I had to see, there is so many inequities of resources, teachers, just the environment of driving on Michigan Avenue, going to school and seeing prostitutes, this and that. Have 70% of these young individuals, when household families. There's just all these struggles that they have gone through. That when people say, "Well, I understand, I know them," I'm sorry, you can't. You have not been in their shoes. You might respect them, but you don't. You can't say that, "Hey, I know exactly what they're going through." And I think that sometimes we need to really understand and learn from through their lens, and figure out how we could come together, inshallah.
Let me say something before Sheikh Abdullah hops in. Habeeb, so it's interesting you bring up Jonathan Kozel's work, because we kind of give it. We have our doc students read some stuff, and then we kind of flash Jonathan's book in front of them, and it's like a fresh meat in front of a dog. We kind of like let us see, because the reason that Jonathan can't see what's in Detroit is because he's not looking for anything positive, man. Mm-hmm. He can't see Malcolm X sitting in the classroom. He just sees somebody who's got some problems. So in other words, it depends on what kind of frame that one comes, because you can only see the prostitutes and you can only see the blight, but you can also see some other things, and those things We're born all so many black leaders that have come out of our communities, man, from the north to the south. One senator said it best. He said, when you go to a black, this is James Anderson's quote in History of African American Education, very, very important work. He said, when you come into the African American schoolhouse in the South, you get a free science lesson because you can look down and see the earth, and you can look up and see the stars. They didn't have any resources, bruh. But look at who they turned out. The great Dr. Abdullah Shabazz and other mathematicians and scientists, because if those people were in Detroit or Chicago, most educators, white and black, would have looked right over them. They wouldn't have seen them. But you bring up another point. I promise I'm gonna stop talking after this, and that is the exoticization that the immigrant community does to black people. They want to get that one Negro, that magical Negro, this is an academic term, a magical Negro. Stop laughing, Abdullah. I can send you the article. It's the magical Negro complex, and in fact, Key and Peele have a magical Negro episode. But what it is that you're fitting into the coloniality hierarchy that has been set forth in this country, where black and indigenous people are always at the bottom. And discourses, and this is what I was speaking with my brother Abdullah Ubaydullah about, that the discourses that are spewed and developed about these people are used to subordinate and keep these people in these kind of positions. Now, it's not immutable. Like Ubaydullah is saying, we're gonna fight all day long. I mean, it's time to go. Right now, it's time. Like the button has been pushed. But what I'm saying is that, unfortunately, because the immigrants have come into and have saw themselves in other places in that hierarchy, white folks at the top, black and indigenous at the bottom, then they have picked up. They don't see the use in us. They don't see the use. They'll use. So, like, for example, I go to the University of Minnesota. Now, at the same time that the Somalis are calling me Mado, which they'll tell you means black, okay? They'll say, oh, that just means black. No, how's it discursively used? Don't lie to me. You don't want your children marrying the Mado. You don't want you to live with the Mado. Mado is nigger in your language, discursively. So, despite that being the case, I go to the financial aid line, I go to the scholarship line, I go to this line, I go to that line. You're in every single black spot that there is to be. You quote Muhammad Ali, you got the Black Lives Matter shirt on. Come on, we got to talk truth today. And then you want to turn around and call me Mado. How do I know this? I would not know if my wife wasn't a Somali. Okay? And so I think that this exoticizing is very, very deep, and it's hierarchical and it's colonial. But I'll stop with that.
Sheikh Abdullah, on the topic and conversation about the immigrant experience and the mingling of immigrant Muslim culture and American Muslims, there's a question that came in, and I guess it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about, is part of the problem that the American Muslims and the youth are trying to be fit into an immigrant Muslim context, and that an American Muslim experience is not being appreciated or accepted? I mean, you've heard some of this conversation before, right? Is there different Islams? Is there an American Islam? Is there a immigrant Islam? So what are your thoughts on that?
Bismillah. The wording can be termed as it may, but there is a different, if you want, for lack of better words, a different, one would say flavor, one would say way or orientation in the way that one implements their Islam. But yes, culture does play a huge role in the actualization of Islam. And that is the lens in which many people have come into Islam. And that needs to be taken into heavy consideration, because when one may otherize or demonize a certain practice or a certain, dare if we say, culture, they don't even realize that, subhanAllah, the way that you came into the religion or the way that it was introduced to your forefathers, there was a cultural nuance. There was a cultural fabric in which that message of Islam came. So to belittle another culture based on the fact that it's foreign to you or it's not normal to you, that's where it's problematic. So if someone was to say an American Islam or a different kind of Islam, if someone practices Islam in the makeup or blueprint of their culture, that's where we say it complements one another. But the problem lies is when one feels that another culture or the way that they practice Islam is superior than another inherently, that's where it's problematic. When we talk about dress, when we talk about ways of learning, that's where it becomes problematic, because people generationally don't even realize that the way and certain things that they do in Islam, they practice Islam, is something that is strictly culturistic. It's not something that has immutable Islamic rhetoric behind it.
Brothers, we got some time left. I'm gonna let you mingle with one another. I mean, if you guys have any follow-up for one of the panelists, please use this time to ask one another questions and just continue this beautiful conversation.
No, I wanted to say to Sheikh Muhammad's point about Jonathan Kozol's book, you know, I've always felt that, Habeeb, wallahi, man, that reading that book, maybe that was all that he could see. And I thought about some of my aversion to some of the protest culture that exists within our community. That protest culture, for me, does not recognize Black excellence enough. It only talks about, it's almost like in talking about what needs to change, we reinforce the idea that what is currently existent is Black people at the bottom. When in actuality, there is so much resilience, beauty, brilliance, dedication. And it's like, don't miss that. Don't miss that, because we're talking about the problems that also exist. Because what I ultimately hope for my brothers, and if they do, it'll be for their own benefit, is that you come to a place of being able to recognize the full range of Black humanity, the full range in all of its various expressions. Not simply, how can we help Black people? How can you learn from Black people? It's not simply, what can we do to help you? And I know that this is well-intentioned, but we are not simply to be helped. We are to be learned from. We are also present to provide guidance. We have beneficial experience. Our community, in my estimation, has the highest moral authority of any community in the world. We should be sitting at the feet of this community, studying its traditions, its engagement with civil rights, not just thinking, okay, your community is destitute. How can I help your community? That's an aspect of it, but don't miss everything else that's there. So I just thought that was a very poignant observation about that book and about anti-racist protests in general sometimes.
Go ahead, Sheikh Abdullah. You seem like you're getting ready for a question.
No. It's just subhanAllah. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot that's been given here, you know. And when really looking at the way forward, I really like to hear y'all's thoughts on the way forward. I mean, we've mentioned it throughout. It's been weaved through our conversation, and we kind of, you know, mentioned certain points of view, and not even points of view, but certain facts. And based off of those facts, how we view certain things and certain problems that we've seen, not only just from now, but that's been lingering, that's been dormant, and it's been ignited by certain events that have taken place, past and present. So one, I mean, throughout all of this, you know, one would possibly ask, what now? And not asking what now in a demeaning sense and just, you know, sort of, okay, what now? But really, for those that, you know, there was a question I had last night. It was someone that said, you know, I don't have any Black friends. I don't have any African-American friends. And the mood and the mode of the question, it seemed like the person felt bad that they didn't have any Black friends. And even in the wording of the question was, you know, what can I do to remedy that problem? So what are your thoughts on that for someone that you've seen, like, you know, you've seen people, you should obey the law, that people would say, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. If someone even asked you, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. And, you know, they make, you know, the mood behind it is the gesture, but then how would you properly go about it in the future? What would you advise those that come to you, Sheikh Muhammad, Sheikh Habeeb, Sheikh Ubaydullah, and they say, you know, and they would say, how can we help, right? But behind that is, dare I even say, a form of guilt, and this is their redemptive process. What would you say to them now? Because I'm almost sure there's numerous people right now in that position, and they're watching. And also, what I've noticed, and I think we talked about that earlier, is a lot of organizations feel that they have to put a statement out, right? They feel that we have to say something.
They shouldn't do it. They shouldn't do it.
Oh no, seriously. Does the Muslim always have to say something in this particular instance, right? And their business or it's not in social work or anything like that. Do they feel that they have to say something? Please.
Yeah, they should say something. Just not now. You should have been speaking years ago against anti-blackness in the community, but you hit it. So yeah, you should speak, but now it seems opportunistic. Mostly. Now you asked the question. I'll be real quick, and I'll let Habeeb and Ubaydullah come in because I know we only have a few minutes left. And that is what now? Well, how many students do you know that studied Islam overseas and from the African American community? Perhaps dozens, maybe over 100.
A minute.
Maybe 200. How many do you know that have built sustainable economic structure so that their communities no longer have to beg, go around, and their leaders don't have to go around and beg?
That's easy. None.
That's the point I'm making, man. We need some dignity and izzah, and we don't have that. As long as, and I love my immigrant brothers, man, but I don't want to have to beg for anything. I'm a man, and my community is what it is. Any other community that went through the transatlantic slave trade, I've been to these communities in Latin America and other places. They have not stood up the same that we have because I think we have something special here, and we can be learned from, but we need to sustain by ourselves with only the help of Allah, and we don't have that. I don't know a single person. I've lived in multiple cities, Ubaydullah, and all I see is, and I'm calling my own people on this, is brothers going around begging something from immigrants, and then in the same breath criticizing the same immigrants they're begging from. Now, what kind of sense does that make, man? Now, it's not only economics, but go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. We have to, like you said, reclaim some izzah, reclaim some dignity, reclaim some pride. And we have to, I love my brothers from other places. I really, I don't want them to think that I'm walking around with all of this animus and I need them to come and kiss me on my forehead. No, that's not, I love you. If you are interested in helping us to, in a sense, reorganize our community so that a proud, capable people are in a position to represent Islam institutionally in this country, then we can talk about how you can contribute to that effort. But I'm only interested in efforts that fundamentally rearrange the way that we think about Blackness within our community. Not kind of like the same hierarchy, top down, you at the top, me down. That for me actually reinforces certain patterns that we need to break. Certain things that we need to step away from. So, like just an example, a friend of mine who, mashallah, in the Chicagoland community, a very successful entrepreneur, and he has historically been very generous to African American Muslim communities. He called me and I said, giving the money is excellent. What about conducting a training for some of our young entrepreneurs? Right? What about you operate a 7-figure entity? I know people that have the talent, have the ambition, have the drive. Maybe they're lacking the connections, the network, and some key components in terms of experiences, technical skills. If you want to do something, in addition to giving money for those direct services, why don't you mentor these guys? If you believe that they really have the ability to be self-sustaining. He said, you know what? No one has ever challenged me with that. That's what we need to be going.
That's right. I talked to Sherman Jackson about the late Professor Muhammad Abdurrahman from Michigan. When he first came out of prison, a sheikh said, whatever university you want to go to, Azhar, Islamic University of Medina, wherever you want to just name it. He said, why don't you send me to school and get my PhD here?
Allahu Akbar.
Because we've been pushed toward only studying deen as though that's going to solve all our problems. Perhaps because the people who came here had given up on their deen. Allahu Alam. Go ahead, Habeeb.
No,
I see you.
This is good. I'm fascinated. I'm listening. Yeah.
I want to jump in because one of the things, wallah, I was thinking about this earlier, saying, why are we complicating this? We have to, not us, I'm saying the situation, and why aren't we, number one, connecting with our fellow human beings at an interpersonal level like we are now, right? So I thought that something that levels the playing field is mentorship, internship, and life skills, soft skills training, and things of this nature, right? If you give people access to trainings that they usually don't are not afforded due to whatever situation they're in, that this is something that will make them more independent. But this is also what, like, person, why I'm into online education, I'm into technology, because online education and technology is something that levels the playing field. It might not make it 100% equal, but if you can, traditionally what you would have to do at a physical location, you can do online now, sometimes even for free. Why not do it, right? So I think Sheikh Ubaydullah, that was an excellent example of how we can use mentorship, internship, and these little micro trainings to actually level the playing field and give everyone an opportunity to better themselves. So I'll thank you for that.
Alhamdulillah. No, mashallah.
No, and that's one thing I want to, when we're talking about, some solutions. I mean, I had the opportunity, and I mean, everybody here, mashallah, is an educator, and I'd like for y'all to even expound upon this on a personal level, from you being educators. I mean, even you, Imran, we've all been educators. I've had the opportunity, and I do mention opportunity to teach at community college. And majority of my students, subhanAllah, they were women that, they had a situation. And this is not only African American, but it was African American and Latino and some Caucasian as well. But seeing the fact that, there was affordable education for them to go on in progress and to move on to a Division I college. I saw that as a huge buffer and means for them. And it gave a lot of them hope, because they would come say, they got, whether it was, the financial aid, or they were able to get in and learn a certain soft skill that empowered them to a degree to where they could eventually move on. And like you mentioned, a lot of these people, it's not like they were ever intellectually challenged. It was what was put in front of them. And it was, the race already started, and then they were told go after, 10 minutes. The opportunity wasn't there like it was for other people. So when seeing that, me personally, I saw, subhanAllah, the institution of community colleges within these areas served as a realistic means for people to continue on and get educated into Division I colleges and etc. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Bismillah. I mean, Sheikh Muhammad, Habeeb.
You can go there. I'm gonna say
Fadal, Habeeb. Really.
Habeeb, go ahead, man. Habeeb, go ahead.
No. I was going to. I had wanted to follow up on some other one's thoughts. So you can go, Brother Abdullah. That I'm gonna.
Bismillah. One of the things that I think is important about what Sheikh Abdullah is saying. I mean, I remember once I was watching a debate about affirmative action, and the way the debate was being framed was, should we give a less deserving African American a seat in preference to a more deserving, objectively, white American student? And I remember thinking to myself, and the two sides were debating the merits or demerits of both propositions. And I remember thinking to myself, even framing it like that reinforces an idea of Black ineptitude,
right? Yep.
Right? Yep. Of Black mediocrity. Whereas what we should be saying is, if we have developed a system that does not recognize the brilliance and talent of these people, what's wrong with that system? Because we believe them to be in possession of it. You see what I'm saying? We believe them to actually be possessed of that brilliance, of that ability, of that talent. There must be something wrong with our system of evaluation. The metrics must be off, that we're incapable of recognizing it. And I think the same thing is true with education. When you educate someone, you're essentially saying to them, this is something I know you can do. This is something I know that you possess. This is something I believe you have. The only thing you need is something to bring it out, something to accentuate it. And then it just becomes about culturally specific ways of educating that take into consideration who you are, where you come from, so that we can maximize your potential. When I give to you directly, even though it's an act of generosity, there may be an implicit suggestion that this is my role and this is your role. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's like al-yadul ulya khayrun min al-yadis sufla. The upper hand is better than the lower hand. I'm the upper hand, you're the lower hand. Whereas when you educate, like what Sheikh Abdullah was saying, you give people a chance to see themselves differently. And, you know, I feel like in my experience, nothing dignifies like knowledge and work. Nothing dignifies like knowledge and work. Nothing. You have so many, I mean, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ is replete with examples, but perhaps the best one is the example of Ibn Mas'ud. Very small, very scrawny, right? So much so that he was in a tree and his legs became exposed, and the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum jami'an, they laughed at his legs. And the Prophet said, if those legs were placed on one side of a scale and the mountain of Uhud was placed on the other side, those legs would outweigh the mountain of Uhud because of the knowledge of the one who owns those legs, right? He was a shepherd, right? He used to, and he wasn't a shepherd of his own flock. He was a hired shepherd. He becomes Muslim and he becomes a maraja. He becomes a person of knowledge. He becomes one of the most honored and dignified members of that community through knowledge, right? So nothing dignifies like knowledge and labor. And we have to continually strive to make both accessible to people, making knowledge accessible to people, but knowledge that empowers, not knowledge that enslaves. I'll say this and I'll shut up. I've seen Islamic knowledge enslave people. I've seen Islamic knowledge leave people in disabled positions where a man is in front of his young son calling the sheikh to get permission to laugh at a joke. And his son is looking at his father thinking, Dad, you're a joke, man. You're a clown. You have all of this and you're a clown. How would his son ever aspire to be a man who doesn't even have the autonomy to laugh? And I have also seen Islam and Islamic knowledge empower people where they have the ability to address their situation spontaneously because of the knowledge that they've received of our tradition. So we have to educate in a way that empowers, and we have to make opportunities for excellence in labor available to people, man. So shout out to Sheikh Abdullah for teaching community college, and may Allah Ta'ala give us the ability to do more of the same, man.
Abby, and I'll say just something real quick, Sheikh Abdullah, and that is that I think that there's an interesting tension with this question that you're asking, and there are multiple pathways to livelihood, man. I mean, you can't stand up in front of your people if you don't have gainful employment. So on the one hand, you know, we're asking a very practical question, and there's pathways to, and you can't even be a productive member of the community unless you can pull your fair share. However, I think there's an existential question at play too, and I think that instead of just as most of us think about it, it will allow me to get that degree, then it will allow me to do this kind of work and have that kind of income coming in. I think that especially for those of us who call ourselves American, and in particular African Americans, or Black Americans, I think that we have to be asking ourselves another question as well, which is, what does my community need in order to survive? And I don't know why we're so arrogant to believe. I remember one of my earliest trips to Belize. I don't know if Jose Acevedo remembers this, who was in the Chicagoland now. We went to Belize with Sheikh Muhammad Adli, and we were staunch, and we were Muslims, we were dressed, and we met this woman, man. She was about 80 years old or so, maybe older, but she said, because Sheikh Adli in his dress, she said, "Oh, I know you. My grandfather used to dress like that." Our community is not proud to be here. What do we need to be doing? What roles do we need to fill in order for us to be here in 100 years from now? Because we're not guaranteed that.
Yep.
And so I think that this tension of I have to do something that I can feed my family with has to coexist with We have to do something that's going to cause us to survive. If we don't have psychologists, if we don't have education scholars like Habeeb and myself, if we don't have people filling all of these other roles, then we're going to have to send our children and our families and our wives and our husbands, for women, of course, off to other people and allow them to do the things that we should be doing for ourselves. We can't stand up. And that's just something that I never hear it hardly talked about in that kind of way. And I'm not professing to know what all of those roles and those emphasis areas should be. But we're not even having the conversation about that because we arrogantly believe that some of us are going to be here. And by the way, I went to Cleveland School in Detroit. There was about 450 students at that time. I can probably count on just a few hands of the people that we know where they are and what they're doing. Now that's one generation, and I'm not. I mean, and I'm not an old guy. I mean.
Habeeb, you wanted to comment earlier.
No, just looking at it from a, just listening to them, and Jazakallah khair, I really appreciate this opportunity. I mean, one part is I think what Sheikh Abdullah Ubaydullah brought up is that the idea of our mindset, especially the immigrant mindset, of hey, there are so much things that they could that the Black community could do to provide us into leading, especially Muslims in America. And I look at it myself when I was a young kid. I remember I could not connect with the sheikh of our masjid, right, back home, and I remember the one that always we were excited about was Imam Faraj al-Hajj in those tapes, right? It was just in the sense because everyone ulama all have content, but to understand the context, there are some things that the individuals from overseas are not going to understand. And when you have individuals who are from here, who grew up here, that is something I realized that the idea of our things and saying, hey, the Black community has done for 400 years, gone through the struggles, built resilience. There's things that we could learn from, right? And I think that's something that more and more we need to kind of make sure that how we develop that, especially our immigrant community, to understand that we're not always the solution. We sometimes might be the problem, and then how can we go ahead and and I like the other thing that asking of always question like, what can we do for you? What can we do for you? And asking that question, I think is there. The second thing is resources. And I think that the idea of what are the resources and how should we provide those resources, and some of the points that the speakers have brought up. And I think that's something that it is like almost to a point where we can really sit down and bring our synergy together and saying, okay, what is it? Not that what I think you need, but what is it that could benefit the Muslim community, the Black community, the Indo-immigrant community, but coming through together and everyone providing resources from different aspects. And then the last thing is, I'm really happy that Dr. Muhammad brought this up, is the mindset. Even though I've been maybe in the inner city, I've taught 7 years, and we get so structured because the scores are so low that you have to okay, because of this situation, because of this, even though there's been individuals who have done well, right? And I think that mindset also in our immigrant community, like, well, why are they, we had some struggles, they had some struggles, but what's going on? And we're always maybe not looking at not looking at the glass half full, but we're looking at it half empty always. And I think that mindset, I really appreciate you kind of bringing up and say, hey, look, even something like this, how you might not realize it, but you're kind of thinking in ways that might not be very beneficial or not beneficial, but could be the mindset wouldn't be in the proper way. And I think just kind of bringing that up, I'm kind of saying, well, hey, there are struggles and that's why they're there. Well, no, there's no doubt about it. We need to help provide and fix those things. But I think when we have this mentality like, oh, okay, well, there are these struggles because this, and this happens, and this happens. And I think I really appreciate you kind of bringing that up. And for us, that the development and thought process, and then kind of looking at things in various different lenses. So I just reiterate a few things that's kind of popped into my mind.
Jazakallah khair, Habeeb. Imran, do I have a chance to ask my brother the question? Okay. So Habeeb brought something. His comments made me think of a question that I would like to pose to everybody. And that question is, what should our vision be? Because, and I'm asking this question because of this, because you could have the best, we could get the resources, we get our paper together. It's happened. We could also get our education in our schools together. Eventually, these things can come into play. We know the technologies. We know ways to generate income and wealth. We haven't done it, but we know the ways to do that. And to Sheikh Abdullah's question, educational institutions, we kind of have some information about what pathways we should take. But what should our vision be? Because I'm not sure we have one. You know, we put the Manna Conference together with all of our leaders from multiple communities back in 07 and 08, I think it was. And I walked away from even that conference this was all of our leaders in the American Muslim community. And I walked away, and I helped organize both conferences, both years. And I walked away not feeling that I had a sense of what our mission, what our vision should be. And the reason that's important is because Elijah started with that and built a nation. He didn't start with the nation. He started with the vision. If we don't have that, it's going to be difficult for us to connect with people. It's going to be difficult for us to get the motivation, the commitment, all of the things that we need in order to sustain our communities are going to fall apart. And then you'll have individuals entering the communities with resources, with knowledge, with wealth, and as quickly as they came in, they'll be gone. Such is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are not going to be able to reproduce ourselves because we don't even have a vision in which. And so I'm wondering, because Sheikh Abdullah asked, where do we start? And I think a question that is commensurate, that goes along with that, is what our vision should be. Codominuous is the term I was looking for. What that is so tightly stuck to and glued to that question is, what is our vision? What do we want to accomplish 50 years from now? Where do we want to be?
Can I ask a question on that question? I think the question to that is when you say who is we?
Yep.
That is a question. I mean, I don't think I should have sole rights to answer that, but I was speaking specifically about African American, Indigenous American, Latino American Muslims with that.
And I think your question was the answer to mine.
But Abdullah, before you start, I do think that it could be a broader we also. I think that we could say American Muslim community as well, but that hasn't worked so well until now, which is why I'm being exclusionary a bit now, because we've been subsumed and sort of drowned out in the broader we, and our issues are not talked about on Friday, if you see what I'm saying. So anyway,
So I think let me expound upon that, and I'm not giving fatwa, but I'd like to answer. I think you answered my first question with your first question. The first thing that we should do is have a vision. That's the first thing. The second thing is have the more exclusive we before looking at the bigger we. And to sound a little, I guess you could say, a poetic, whatever the case may be, many other individuals have established their we's, and there are some people that haven't established their we's. Right? Yes, there are people and that's the problem. And it seems like, subhanAllah, within the African American experience, those we's have been established, as you mentioned, Nation of Islam. Dare we even say the Black Panthers, the Black Panther movement. I mean, like you said, they had that vision, and it was a solution, and it was organized, and subhanAllah, it was systematic, and it was intentful. You know, it was full of intention, because they understood we have to be established first. And I mean, even, you know, Malcolm X being that example of that, even though he was Muslim, it was, no, we have to understand our situation here locally and make sure that, you know, civically, that we are established and understand how we can be autonomous, and then move on to the bigger we, you know, generic we that you're talking about.
I agree.
And that's where
No, go ahead.
And that's where it's neglected. And I mean, and subhanAllah, and I think, to be totally honest, you know, I studied overseas. Ustadth Ubaydullah studied overseas. You studied overseas. And I'm going to say this, you know, I think one of the things that liberated me within the Islamic paradigm of scholarship was learning usul al-fiqh. Why? Because from usul al-fiqh, you have branches from it, the maqasid of Sharia. You understand the Islamic objectives, that all of the proofs in Quran and Sunnah has to fulfill these 5 or 6 objectives, irrespective even of religion, that it comes to preserve these rights. And if we say freedom of religion, it's preservation of religion, because you want to preserve that religion, therefore have the freedoms to exemplify it wherever you may be. And then when we look at the qawaid al-fiqhiyya, the Islamic maxims, right? So when you have a verse from the Quran or Hadith, there are certain maxims and bylaws and principles that help fulfill the objective. So one of the ones that really liberated me, I'll never forget when I was in classes, when we learned al-aada muhakkama. You know, that the urf, that the custom can be law, right? That can stand in the place of law. So when I understood that, that's when I said, you know, Islam is not so, I mean, the text, the spirit of the text is not rigid. It's there to beautify the existing culture and to, lack of better words, purify it. Because Allah created these different cultures and colors and shuruban wa qaba'il for the only purposes for us to know. So I think it's important, and we see it organically. And this is, you know, the problem that we, a lot of times we don't want to admit, that every other nationality and culture, they even have their language, man. They have their language that they could go back to their culture and their country. But which I think hopefully starts now is with the African American experience. A lot of things have been stripped for them, stripped from them, to where tracing back their lineage, it's not even, in some places not even an option. It's not even possible, right? So I think those nuances need to be understood, to where they understand when someone says, okay, there's a quote unquote African American Islam, we can't be so simplistic and say, no, all of us are brothers and Muslims. Oh, really? Let's just take a look at our masters. Let's take a look at our authoritative, you know, cuisine at certain places and masters, and thinking, you know, oh, this must taste good, you must love this. No, we have to take a step back and understand and realize that no, there are, so every culture should have their own autonomous structures, to where they'll be strong enough to come together, all together as quote unquote brothers and sisters. And I think, in conclusion, I think, you know, the answer to my question was your initial question, that we have to have a vision, and then also, you know, making sure that every culture, custom, that they have their internal strength, because they know their struggles, and we won't know their struggles as they will know their struggles. And that's every national. I remember Imran and I were going back and forth, because, you know, he was talking about how, you know, even slavery during, you know, in India, what took place. I mean, the experience with the British and the Indians, and even the salt, you know, trade, how the salt trade took place, you know, and like, you know, as an African American, they may not know that, but when we come and sit together and understand each other's struggles, we know how to back off when you want to maybe, you know, have a lecture in your language at this time in the mosque. Fine, I'm not going to say it's racist, but at the same time, when I want to have and be with quote unquote my people for a certain experience that we all share and understand, you need to give me that space. And that is the exemplification of Islam, you know, in that whole structure and paradigm. I don't think we should be so simplistic when talking about brotherhood or Islam as you know, a brotherhood, and belittling that. And Allah knows best.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, Sheikh Muhammad, Dr. Muhammad, you know, when I think about what our vision is, I'm always inspired by two prophetic ideals. One is that of Musa, alayhi salam, that we should actually have a Musawi. We should have, you know, a vision that is very similar to Moses. Moses is instructed to go back to Fir'aun, and he says to him, فَهَدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى, I will guide you to your Lord, and you will fear him. And that entails, listen, what we're saying to the power structure, I'm not petitioning you to be a part of your rendezvous of victory. Musa does not want to be a part of Pharaoh's rendezvous of victory. He doesn't want that. He's saying to Pharaoh, listen, I am telling you what is necessary for your own redemption. If you reject, you will be destroyed. Me, I am here to liberate the children of Israel. But I'm offering you a message that can redeem you. And I think this is what we have to say to the dominant culture in this country. Listen, I am here to liberate the children of Israel. If you take heed to what I'm telling you, you can save yourself. If not, you will be destroyed. And I think that this is one prophetic ideal of how we can engage and what our mission should be. And all of our institutional formation is an expression of that, is an expression of that dawah. We're giving dawah to the power structure, and we're here to liberate our people. The other prophetic ideal is that of Yusuf, alayhi salam, which speaks to me in a very visceral way. Betrayed by his brothers, separated from his father, separated from his motherland, enslaved, jailed in spite of his innocence for a crime that he did not commit. He impresses upon his fellow inmates his value because of God-given talents that he possessed that could not be suppressed, that could not be repressed. This reminds me of African Americans every time I read Surah Yusuf. He had talents that even in his state of bondage could not be repressed. And he demonstrated his value through those talents. And he gave dawah and he told the truth. But when he was summoned from prison, he was asked to serve the society, to help them avert famine and avert destruction. He was asked to serve the very society that had wrongly imprisoned him. And he did not reject them. SubhanAllah. He did not reject them. And I often ask myself, as an African American, if I was in possession of something that could save the soul of America, would I give it? Or would I? Because when I read that story, if I'm Yusuf, I'm saying, yeah, I know the interpretation of the dream, but I ain't telling you. Yeah, I know how you can save your society, but I ain't telling. I want to see this thing burn. I want to see this thing go down. But in his beauty, he says, yes, I know. He establishes his innocence. That thing that I was blamed for never happened. And then he serves. And I think this is also a prophetic calling that we also have to respond to. Is if we are in possession of something that can save the soul of this nation, then we should give it, man. We should give it. We should give it. You know. But I do think in either case, whether that of Moses or that of Yusuf, our task is nothing short of saving the soul of this country, man. I believe that. So yeah, like my man said, like Pinky and the Brain, the whole world, Brain. Pinky, the whole world. The whole world. The whole world. I think that's our mission, Dr. Muhammad.
Habeeb, I'm gonna let you get a word in, I think, and then we'll wrap this up.
I'm listening. No. I'm good here today. I that's why I told you when I came in here. I was like, look, you know, this is one of those moments like, you know, Habeeb's not talking too much. But no. You know, hopefully, you know, I think it's just good. I mean, for this conversation, and it's comfortable, and it's good when you know that you can, you know, for us to really have these individuals who are highly involved in the community also understand what, you know, and have been very patient with our communities, right? May Allah reward them, because I know and many of them have visited and stuff. And I think what Brother Ubaydullah brought up the story of Yusuf and that analogy, that is just that took me right now, you know, at another whole level. So I really, for me, I just want to soak this all in. So, you know, I'm not talking. But I'm going to call Brother Dr. Muhammad after a long time. I got to talk to him about a few other things.
We can definitely do that.
Don't forget about the basketball challenge to Ubaydullah. So you know.
Oh yeah, no. Look.
He's mad because he didn't get picked on in a public school team.
Oh, I played basketball all throughout high school.
Well, you got to pray, because I didn't see you at any of the All-Star games, and we're almost the same age. I didn't see you in any travel team.
Remix.
You're a little bit older than me. You're a little bit older than me. But what I will say is, we can get on the court anytime you want. I'm free tomorrow.
Shots fired.
I can get you. I have 2 gyms, two school facilities.
Whenever you're ready, just let me know.
I'm taking this for you guys too, inshallah.
Look, all you gotta do
As
is
long as I can get
all
some
you gotta do
knowledge
is pay your
afterwards, you
tuition.
sit down and you teach me some knowledge, then it's all game.
You north side, south side beef, mashallah.
I'm not. Look, we're not teaching anything about Islam that day. Only thing I'm teaching you is about a crispy pull-up jump shot.
Look,
A crispy pull-up jump shot.
This is
halal.
This is the only time. This is gonna be the only time I'm going to tell you that your knowledge is superior. But when it comes to basketball, you reach, I teach. That's all that's going to happen.
Oh man!
When it comes to deen and any other part of life, you know more than I do. But when it comes to basketball,
Oh, yo, they must have both watched The Last Dance, man.
We're setting this up.
No.
I'm texting you right after this.
You saw Habeeb?
We're going to tape the game. We're going to tape this game.
And we're going to tape the game, inshallah.
I want to thank you guys, man. Mashallah, like honestly, to be and obviously Habeeb keeps trying to remove himself from this, but for me, Habeeb is also a good example of a leader in our larger community and a good role model along with all of you. And Sheikh Abdullah, mashallah, he's doing his thing by being an imam and a teacher at various organizations. And I think it's these interpersonal connections and relationships that you guys are able to form with your students and your contemporaries and the younger generations that really undo the bonds of the wrong mindset and change some of these mental tendencies that we may have. So I think this is more impactful than a lot of things that we see going around us. So thank you guys. Thank you, Sheikh Abdullah, for always being there for all of us. And thank you, Habeeb, for being the principal at my kids' school and offering them a great service, mashallah. And Sheikh Ubaydullah, we don't, thank you for the dress code and making sure we step up our game and dress according to
our kids loved him. He came to do like a hot topics thing, and they were just like, just like he's like, the first they were just amazed, and then the best part of it is like, hey, that's a sharp looking shape. That was the best part. That's a sharp looking shape.
That's really the kind of interactions that will help undo some of the beliefs that the young generation have. I'll tell a quick story. I met my uncle in London, who's a religious scholar, and this is the first scholarly person that I met that I had a personal relationship with. I was 16 or 17, and I wasn't practicing at the time. And the guy had a beard. He was wearing a thobe. We went to the grocery store, and he bought his wife flowers, and I was blown away. I was blown away because he had a beard and a thobe, and he had a crisp thobe. He had a nice beard. He used to always iron his clothes and dress nice. But I was shocked by the fact that he bought his wife flowers, and he was doing the grocery shop. He was doing the grocery shop. And I was
stuff for the last stuff.
Who a sheikh?
So he really started undoing some of the mental restraints that I had in my brain. And Dr. Muhammad, we just met earlier today, but I know inshallah this relationship is going to be long lasting, and I appreciate what you're doing in academia and how you're enlightening the community by just being raw and authentic, and I really appreciate that. So may Allah reward all of you brothers, and obviously you guys can close it out if you want. And I'm going to remind you guys, please, if you get a chance, go onto accceducate.org to learn more about the organization. Also, do visit this video because a lot of people left comments and have questions about implicit racism, about using the terminology Black and African and Black American. Can we use these things? So if you guys get a chance, please visit the comment section on the Facebook and YouTube page and try to address it. And that's it from my side. I'll let you guys close it out or give a final word if you want, and we'll close it out.
Sheikh Abdullah, can you close us with the dua, Habeeb? I just want to tell you, I'm eager to do some work together, man. I really love the concept of New You, and it might be the best name of any Muslim organization in America. This idea, a new you, but we knew you. It's a double entendre. It's a double entendre that's really, really dope. I esteem the work that you do, Habeeb, and just look forward to connecting with you more, man. So
alhamdulillah, man. But mashallah, jazakallah khair. But as we all study fiqh, and there's one beautiful maxim in fiqh when they talk about tahara and purification. They said, إذا حضر الماء بطل التيمم وأنا Abdullah Turabi. They say if water is present, then you cannot make tayammum. It's impermissible.
Subhanallah.
And my name is Abdullah Turabi. I'm from Turab. So we have the mat. We have Sheikh Ubaydullah. You know, if the water is present, we got to get replenished, Sheikh. I mean, you know, come on.
I've heard some slick ways of getting out of making the final dua, but that's the slickest, and I'm gonna honor that, inshallah.
Barakallah, jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربي رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين.
Brothers, don't leave yet. Just I'm gonna end the broadcast and just stand for 1 second. To all our viewers, thank you guys so much. This is one of the programs that we've put together via ACC, a continuous charity, which is providing interest-free loans so students can pursue their higher educational dreams and inshallah be transformed through their educational pursuits and uplift their communities and give back to their communities. And you get to do it interest-free. So if you borrow 20,000, all you give back is 20,000. You get to study at cost. So please do visit the organization. Do like and forward the video, and please do make supplicate, make prayers or offer supplications and make dua for our brothers here. And until next time, inshallah, assalamu alaikum.
Just one last thing, Sheikh Imran.
Yes,
these brothers, mashallah, have efforts. If they have some efforts and, you know, some books that they may have been written, do you mind mentioning that? Because mashallah, I mean, just don't want to leave it here at the names and, you know, the work that these brothers have put in, you know, mashallah.
Brother Muhammad, I know you have a book. I was looking at it on your website today. There we go.
Whoa, that's a big book, man. That's a big book. Man, like, that shit. Is that a book or is that a okay, man?
No, I was doing a book signing. I was doing a book signing.
I don't know if that was a book or a billboard. You know what I mean? Stop. I guess that's a book. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, thank you for that shout out. I appreciate that.
Where can we find the book, Brother Muhammad?
Harvard Education Press or either Amazon.
And one more time, the name is Culturally Responsive Leadership.
School Leadership. It was published in 2018. Culturally Responsive School Leadership. Can you see that, or is it flare up?
And what we'll do, inshallah, we'll share it on our newsletter and we'll put it in the comments and the description of the video. Sheikh Abdullah, everybody, New You, KNEWU. Also, him and his wife have an amazing organization called Taysir Education. Great initiative, mashallah. He's also a community leader in Capel, Texas, and he is the head of Revert Affairs in Yakin. Yakin. And Brother Habeeb, go ahead, Sheikh Abdullah. You're gonna say something?
No, I'm just saying, please. I want to hear what, you know, brother Sheikh Habeeb.
Obviously, because him and Sheikh Ubaydullah are physically closest to me because we live in Chicago. But Brother Habeeb is an amazing superintendent, amazing educational visionary. He's authored many books. He just last year, mashallah, and you know, I know he doesn't like sharing this, but he overcame cancer, mashallah. And while he was going through his treatment, he was still grinding and he was still putting in the effort, which I have to give him credit for, because this is something that would paralyze people. It would put the fear of God in people and they would stop working, but he kept on working, and I have to give credit where credit is due. And he's one of the guys that I look up to and that I consider a mentor. So please follow him, make dua for him and his school, because you know the school is providing an excellent service, and right now because of COVID, you know, everybody's struggling. So Brother Habeeb, is there anywhere people can follow you?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of articles I write every 2 months on various things. So it's on our school website, mccacademy.org, and then right now in our high quality education consulting, we have a lot of other books that we've done on parenting, social issues. So alhamdulillah, and we're making some parenting 2-minute videos that we have started, inshallah.
Mashallah.
Nice.
And with Sheikh Evans, mashallah, he is at the Alim program, and I believe Alim is based in Canton, Michigan. Is that correct, Sheikh?
Well, Alim began in Michigan, but now Alim is based wherever you see me.
And I think this is the 3rd or 4th program I've done with Sheikh Evans. We had one with ACC. We did one on the Dean Show. So Sheikh Evans is becoming a staple, and he's also invited me to his house, mashallah. He's a balanced brother, mashallah, who I love for multiple reasons, because of his knowledge of the religion, and also, and again, we keep poking fun at it, but the dress is hot, man, mashallah. So we gotta learn the fiqh of dressing from you, so mashallah. So
Sheikh of fashion.
the sheikh of fashion, mashallah. So
We're gonna need a lot of things on that.
I think
No, no,
A lot of voice. A lot of voice.
Alhamdulillah. No, Habeeb,
Oh,
look, Habeeb, don't change the topic. I'm blazing you on the court.
Ooh,
Don't change
Marty.
the topic.
I'm
Don't
gonna
change the topic.
I got we're gonna call it. Now we're gonna tape this and I'm gonna send it to both of these guys.
you know what?
Video.
I'm worried,
I
Sheikh.
would
I ain't trying to talk trash, Sheikh, but I'm worried because Habeeb was quiet the whole time. But as soon as you talked about basketball, it's like, you know, Sheikh Abdullah gave the example of the wall.
That's the only time I was going to speak, right? I told you when I was coming in this room, I'm not going to talk to you about it.
Look, I've heard Habeeb can play. I'm not taking anything from him. He can play. He just can't beat me.
Sheikh Abdullah gave
Simeon Robinson played on, unless you something happened. Okay, you might make some, you got some superpower duas. That's the only way to help, right? In my whole high school, man, they used to put me, I would be called Vladi, Saddam Hussein. You can tell all the trash talking. I grew up with it. I mean, that's all. I had to.
This talk is.
I had a lot of Ubaydullahs, on the other side of the court, just talking.
I'm going to give the example. Sheikh Abdullah gave the example of tayammum and water. So in this case, Sheikh Ubaydullah, seems like you're the water and Habeeb's the Gatorade. So I don't know how it's gonna play out. But
we'll just have to wait and see.
Inshallah. I'm excited about this now.
Brothers, Jazakallah khair, and forgive me for the excessive joking, but love you guys for the sake of God, man. So stay blessed, and I'm excited about the possibility of having you guys on again. And please do make it part of your mission to support ACC through this continuing education opportunities. Have a good evening with your families, and we'll talk soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Good seeing you, brother.